I'm Allison Clements, one of the 5 commissioners of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I'm sorry I won't be able to be in person with you all at the Policy Circle Leadership Summit. I'd love to be in West Palm instead of Washington, D.C. for a few days. Unfortunately, I won't be able to join, but what a really exciting conference that you all are engaging in. The topic of energy certainly is close to my heart and has been for 20 years. The nexus with the water industry and the issues that our country will face related to both areas from a policy perspective, from an industry perspective, are really important. And so I certainly applaud the choice of conversation that you are having today. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what FERC is, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and how I came to be in the role I'm in. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, as we call it FERC, is a federal regulatory body. There are several regulatory bodies: the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and these are the SEC. These are commissions that engage in regulation, and we have a quasi-independent, or we're separated from the rest of the administration, the president and the political agencies. So we are separate from EPA and the Department of Energy and the Department of Interior. Our regulatory jurisdiction is over utilities on the transmission side and on the sale of electricity side, the sale of energy. And so if you're sitting at your home, let's say in West Palm Beach, and your utility is Florida Power and Light, and you get a utility bill each month for the electricity that Florida and Power and Light provides to you to power your home or power your business, the regulation of that portion of the energy industry is done at the state level. So the state of Florida has its own utility commission. What happens is, of course, transmission crosses state lines. Pipelines, gas pipelines cross state lines. And so in the 1930s, it was the Congress identified a gap where the flow of electrons effectively, the flow of molecules of fuel across state lines weren't getting regulated. And so they created a federal regulator. And so now I am one of currently 4, we have spots for 5 people, regulate the sale of electricity from the generator. So whether it be from a gas plant or a solar farm or an offshore wind facility to Florida Power and Light. And then the state of Florida has regulatory jurisdiction from Florida and Power and Light on the smaller distribution lines into your home. So that's, we focus on, in addition to transmission and electric sales, we also have jurisdiction to approve licensing and relicensing of non-federal hydropower facilities. So not the Hoover Dam, which is a large federal facility, but the privately owned hydropower facilities are within our jurisdiction. And I also mentioned the interstate gas pipelines, LNG facilities, and then we have on the electric side, reliability jurisdiction. So we are responsible for working with another entity to ensure we have sufficient reliability standards. So when you think of the lights going out in a cold weather event or an extreme heat situation or after a hurricane, there's several entities that will have some regulatory jurisdiction in that situation. Our commission, FERC, is one of them. So we have, the way that you become a commissioner is to be appointed by the president and approved by the Senate. There can be, out of 5 commissioners at FERC, 3 can be of the president's party and 2 must be of the other party. So I actually was a Democratic appointee recommended by Senator Schumer to the Trump White House. Because for the minority party or the president's, the party that isn't the president's party, the majority leader in the Senate is the person who makes those recommendations across these regulatory bodies to the White House. And, of course, politics are interesting. It played out that for various reasons, I was able to get through, get approved, get nominated in the first place. It took about 20 months by the president at the time, and then approved by the Senate. So I now sit as one of these 5 commissioners. We have 5-year terms. They are staggered, with the idea being that approach sets up an independence from the political branches, from the legislative branch and from the executive branch. The way we do our work is to create rules, say, okay, so, and this is a focus of mine that I'll get to, but a lot of the rules that regulate how the power system works, how transmission gets paid for and developed, how power plants interconnect to the grid, how customers decide what electricity they want to buy or whether or not they have a choice in the source of electricity. A lot of those rules were created in, let's say, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And for a long time, the electricity grid didn't change that much. Of course, in the last 10 years, you've seen a real explosion of consumer demand for clean energy resources. And that is changing the resource mix on the grid at a faster pace than it has really ever been done before. Not a pace we can't handle, but we have all of these rules that apply to transmission and electricity sales and reliability designed around a set of resources that behave differently than the resources coming online. So while you've got wind, solar, offshore wind, energy storage, these types of resources coming online, they provide a whole lot of opportunity and benefits to the grid. They have free fuel sources in the case of wind and solar. They can be nimble. They can be powered by inverters that make them smart and really able to move quickly up and down and create stability on the grid. They have different characteristics like clouds and rain and things and hot summer days that make the wind slow down. And so the system has to be planned to be reliable and flexible in light of these varying characteristics. And so one of the things I think of in my role is to try and update those rules to make it fair. Our commission has to be technology neutral by statute. We're economic regulators. And in my mind, I'm trying to make the system fair. I'm the third of four kids. That's something that I've spent my whole life trying to do. And it's a very natural role for me to play now. I'm the only woman on the commission. I have three colleagues, one Democrat who's the chair, and then two other colleagues who were appointed by Republicans. And, like any industry, we're outnumbered as women. I came up in the energy industry first as a lawyer in private practice, working on both the regulatory side and FERC law, like I just described, as well as on the transactional side. So the project financing of biofuels facilities, of clean energy facilities, a little bit of M&A on the fossil generation side, and heavily male-dominated industry. But one that was really exciting to me because in my mind, the electricity system is the backbone for everything that we do in the American economy, and one where innovation has lagged, or at least when I started doing it 20 years ago, innovation had lagged. We weren't, the costs of solar, wind, and batteries hadn't come down such that they're cost competitive like they are today. Being one of the few women was never a detriment in terms of my interest. It was present and something I adapted to. And I think a lot about the way that as a woman trying to develop and grow in the industry adapts or behaves to fit in. I think that has really changed a lot. And I get really excited when I see women coming up in the industry today who I think are taking a different approach. It's not to say the challenges have gone away. They are still real. I mean, I feel it every day. I went to a site visit a couple of weeks ago where there weren't any women, and they had to fly someone in from a different state to ensure there was a woman part of the team to greet me on that site visit. So briefly about my journey, I was in private practice for 5 years, and I went to a nonprofit called Natural Resources Defense Council, where I spent 9 years in various roles. And this is, I think, an important lesson that I learned along the way. I really wanted to work at NRDC. They were known as a very effective environmental organization. They hired really talented people, and it was hard to get in. But because I had done this transactional work, I had a lot of experience with contracts, and they were hiring in an institutional role, not a role to be an advocate, but a role to help systematize a lot of the internal processes of a quickly growing nonprofit organization. I came into that role, and the person who hired me full well knew I would rather be on the substantive side, but I had a skill, and he thought that was compelling to the rest of the advocates to say, this person isn't coming in to try and clip your wings. They're coming in to try and help you and make us a better, more efficient, and legally safer organization. So I did that for 3 years, and I think my boss and I both knew that I had paid my dues. I had taken that role in the organization, and then an opportunity opened up to lead this federal regulatory work, this work focused on FERC. And so I was able to take on that role for several years while I still lived in New York. I moved out west and ended up leaving the organization because of my geography, did some independent consulting, and then worked at a foundation supporting strategy around these issues. You might say, why does climate change and environmental people care about FERC, this agency? Well, if you pass a law that says, say you're in New Mexico or Washington State or Illinois just passed a law, Virginia has passed a law, all these states say we're going to achieve 100% clean energy. That's great, but the day that the governor signs that law isn't the final point, it's the starting point. Now you have this system of transmission and electricity system market rules that I just described being either facilitating implementation of those policies or acting as barriers to implementation of those policies. And along the way, as those policies are getting implemented, my commission, FERC, has a responsibility to keep prices fair for customers and to contribute to reliability. And so I think of our agency as playing a critical role in facilitating whatever's happening outside of the commission. It's not the commission's job to choose which resources are going to win in the marketplace. It's not our job to favor wind or solar or storage or gas plants. It's our job to facilitate what market drivers are doing. And it's such an exciting time to be at the commission in this moment, because as you all know, and the reason you're participating in this conference, clean energy is increasingly the cheapest source of energy available for customers. Tech companies, big tech companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc., they're demanding clean energy. Corporations, more traditional corporations who've been the backbone of our economy for a long time, Coca-Cola, FedEx, you name it, are also demanding clean energy. And so that's exciting. We have this opportunity to harness innovation and move the country forward by making these rules fair, making it ensure that they don't, just by their age and their failure to contemplate the changing resource mix, serve as barriers to the place that our country, I think, and customers across the country want to go. There are two more points. One is that there are utility commissions across the country. Every state has a utility commission that effectively plays the role that FERC does at the federal level for your individual state. The commissioners are, in most states, appointed, in some states elected to those commissions. There's such an important agency in your state. To the extent you're thinking about ways to get involved, job changes, the training that you can get from utility commissions is just tremendous. Simply, now that COVID has caused a lot of their proceedings to be streamed, just kind of tuning in. And if you can get over the fact that we all speak in jargon and some of the words don't make any sense, kind of get the idea of what's happening, who's represented before these commissions. There's a lot of opportunity for engagement. I think any person who is hoping to go into the energy industry, any woman who's hoping to go into the energy industry, I'd say check out your state PUC. There's a lot of exciting opportunity. Certainly, it is serving in the public interest, and you get paid like that is the case. It's really invaluable experience that you can then take anywhere in the world. I think the commission via the federal legislation shares jurisdiction, and our jurisdiction often runs up against each other with these state utility commissions. That arrangement has worked for 100 years. As we get into these changing resources, as your car batteries can turn into resources that contribute to the grid, as your apartment building collectively can be harnessed to provide resources to the grid. We've had some growing pains relative to the relationship with states and the federal jurisdiction. And so that's something I'm very focused on because I think it works. I think we have to figure out the path together. I don't think we get very far by digging in and kind of each expressing dominance of jurisdiction. And so that's something that I've been focused on. I've actually been spending time speaking with each of the utility commissions across the country. I'm about halfway through, so I have 25-ish more to go. I guess my words of wisdom and advice for any of you who are thinking about energy as a career, the world is your oyster. I think energy is a key component of any type of industry, not just getting the electricity system right and in the weeds of the regulatory details like I do, but every company who's doing anything, whether it be manufacturing, retail sales, service industry, all of it has energy as a important and often priority cost input into the processes. And understanding the way that our electricity system works, the way the gas market works, is just a very, very powerful tool. You certainly have, as we go through this resource mix change, the number of companies, investment firms, law firms, clean energy developers, energy efficiency providers, storage companies. They're just the number of available jobs and companies is exploding. I think regardless of what happens in Washington around the current bipartisan infrastructure and reconciliation conversations, that's not going to change because that's what customers in the markets are demanding. So number one, it's a great industry to be getting into. And number two, even if you don't stay in the industry, you have such a powerful tool to go out and be effective. So, when you're reading the paper this week about international gas prices rising and what that means for the U.S. this winter, I could talk for 2 hours about that, and so could many other people. You have a context within which to understand those world events and those domestic events in a way that is really exciting and really important. So we need women at the top. We need women pushing through. We need to acknowledge that the energy industry, like many others, are making progress, but there's still a long way to go. We need women of color to say, I'm here, I have a perspective, and I may not have come up through your standard college, law school approach where I focused in administrative law and did all these things, but I have a lot to say and a lot to contribute. And I think finding mentors, finding peer support, friends and networks, I think there's so many really good examples these days of women organizing and coming together in support. We have the ability to change the way things get done. I genuinely believe that. I'm looking forward to hopefully having at some point another woman serve with me on this commission, and I make sure that I make that part of what we're talking about here. Because if we're thinking about success in the energy transition, that has to be an equitable transition, and there's so many pieces to that for another day. But that's a place where women individually and collectively can make a big difference. So with that, I think I'll say thank you. What a great organization the Policy Circle is. I'm really impressed with the approach and the ability to organize people. There's so much power in women organizing together. So congratulations and enjoy your conference.